now.
All right, welcome to episode 14 of Sharks Talk 916, brought to you by Sports Talk 916. I'm Chad, and with me, as usual, is Nolan Torrey. We're going to just jump right in today and talk a little bit about the, I guess, doom and gloom is the name of this episode, if we were to name episodes. So we're going to talk a little bit about the breakdown, like what's been going on with the Sharks' disastrous start. We're going to play a little bit of blame game, see who we should and shouldn't blame for this. We're going to talk a little about DeBoer and coaching, and then we're going to try and discuss some bright spots. Hopefully there are bright spots. So
a couple.
We'll try and point those out to everybody as well, so that we don't just, sound bad the whole time.
So, I mean, there is reasons for hope. There may not be many of them, but it's not completely lost yet. So.
Yeah. No hope. I mean, it's a long season, right? It's not baseball, but I mean, 80-something games is a long time.
Yeah, we're only 15 games in, so not even a quarter of the way quite yet. So.
And as everyone likes to point out, hey, look at where the Blues were before the.
Yeah, that's probably never going to ever happen again, but it does show that it can happen. And they were, I think, bottom of the league in January. So, I mean, that's granted. If we get to December this way, I'd be concerned. But, yeah.
Yeah, well, and their bottom of the league didn't look quite as bad as our
right
now. So I guess let's jump into it. So the disaster continues. So when we last left off, Marlowe had joined the team, and we'd gotten a couple wins, and we were all feeling really good, and he was going to be the savior that brought the Sharks back from the brink. How did that turn out, Nolan?
Well, it's kind of funny. I remember saying on that episode that his first game back against Chicago, he looked great, and the last couple of games after that, he was kind of mediocre, and I was curious whether his impact was going to last. Obviously, I was onto something that it wasn't going to last. Not that he's been bad personally, but he hasn't, really contributed much after those first few games. But the team as a whole has just gone down the crapper. I think we've lost, 4 or 5 in a row now.
I mean, for what the stats worth, Marlowe's the only one with a positive plus-minus on the team. So he's at least doesn't seem to be hurting us, even if it's not.
Granted, he missed, the first 5 games that they were one game.
Yeah. 4 games. Yeah, he played 11 out of 15. So
but just to illustrate how bad the team has been, right now they are tied for last in the NHL amongst all teams in terms of points, despite having played 15 games, which is right up there with the top teams in the league. In terms of goals allowed, they've allowed the 3rd most goals per game. They've scored the 4th fewest. Really, their biggest issue has been 5-on-5 play. We'll talk a little bit more about it when we get into the bright spots, but their special teams have actually been pretty darn good, and that's probably almost the most alarming part, is that their special teams have been good, yet they still haven't won hardly any. They've won 4 out of 15 games, despite having pretty good special teams overall, which just tells you how bad they've been 5-on-5.
I mean, they lost a game where they had 54 shots on net.
Yeah, it was like 51-52 against Winnipeg, which, everyone looked at that game and said, okay, this is going to be the turning point. They should have won that game, but at least, all right, let's build off this. And then they turn around and drop a stinker against Vancouver the next night, and then tonight will be the follow-up to that game. So
I have a question kind of before we jump into the blame game. How much do we talked about at the beginning of the season how you're going to see less offense from this team. That's going to be one of the things that's missing. How much is that? How much is it that the defense is really the same defense we had last year? It's just more glaring how bad they are because we're not putting up the points. What do you think about that?
I mean, my perspective has kind of changed. I mean, last year, we talked a lot about, okay, is it goaltending to blame, or is it the defense that's leaving the goaltending out to dry? And I tended to side more on the side that our defense was leaving goaltending out to dry. But the more and more you watch this team, sure, they could be better defensively, but at some point, your goalie's got to make saves. And that game against Winnipeg that you referenced was a great example. There was a stat that night that the high danger scoring chances, which is an official stat that they keep. Granted, we know that the stat keepers are not the most accurate some nights in terms of how they evaluate certain things, especially judgmental stats like that. But the Sharks had 17 high danger chances that night compared to 2 for Winnipeg. So Winnipeg had 3 goals on 2 high danger chances, whereas the Sharks had 2 goals on 17 high danger chances. Now you can look at that and say, well, that speaks to the lack of offense and not having the guys that can finish. But to me, I look at that and go, okay, sure, the defense could be better, but the problem really is in net.
It's definitely a tale of two goalies, right? I mean, you're talking about 16 saves out of 19 shots for the Sharks versus 51 saves off 53 shots or whatever. If you wanted to see what it looks like when a goalie is helping carry their team, you look at the Jet side of the ice, right? And you can see that. And the Sharks just don't have that. And I think that we've talked about it. There's no doubt that the defense can be better. We're going to talk about that coming up. But at the same time, you and I both feel, and not everybody agrees with this, but I feel a lot of the goals that go in on Jones are soft goals. And they're soft goals early on. So, I mean, it was rough to watch that game because seeing that many friggin' shots and, we couldn't get it in the back of the net was just crazy.
And I think Justin brings up a good point in the chat room that I do think sometimes they oversell on offense, especially when you're struggling to score. You're going to tend to be focused more on offense, and that burns them on the back end. So I do agree that is something they need to be aware of, especially in those games where they're sort of taking it to the team. I think back again to the Winnipeg game where, they were dominating most of the second and third period, probably getting frustrated that they weren't scoring, and you sort of cheat for offense because you're not scoring. And then sure enough, that opens up an opportunity for them. They get one chance, they score, and game's over. So,
well, I saw an interesting stat. I think Kurz posted it that we've had like 3 or 4 games where we've taken over 50 shots. We've lost every single one of them. That stat may be a sign of things going badly, not really a sign of things going well, right? If you're taking 50-something shots, it's because you're literally just throwing everything at the net, hoping something goes in. Not getting the quality attempts.
I mean, historically, I don't have the numbers historically, but I feel like the Sharks have a lot of those games, although that next night, Pittsburgh had a game against, I think it was Edmonton, where same thing, they had 50-plus shots and lost. So it's almost like, I mean, you almost have to be behind to get that amount of shots because you're continuing to press, right? Where if you're up, you're going to sort of take your foot off the gas typically. So those huge disparity shot games typically are either very close games or the team with a lot of shots a lot of times is behind.
Well, it's insane to me that how well we can play defense when we're shorthanded, right? So clearly our guys can be defensive minded. They know what to do. Granted, it's a little different when you can clear and you don't have to necessarily play the same type of defense that you play 5-on-5, but It seems like that goes out the window once we get back to 5-on-5 every time.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into the blame game. I think we kind of already previewed our answer for the first one, but so the first sort of thinking about this, I mean, there's kind of a few individuals and groups on Shark social media that get blamed for all the team's problems currently. So we're going to go through each of those and whether we think that criticism is fair or unfair. So we'll start with goaltending. I mean, you could look at just Jones and Dell individually, but their numbers are pretty much the same. So in terms of goaltending, do you think the criticism and the blame they've gotten is fair or unfair?
I think goalie on a hockey team is like president of the United States, right? Like it's if things go well, if things go well, they're great, they're amazing, and then if things go poorly, they're terrible. They suck so much. So, do they deserve the amount of blame they're getting? Maybe not. Do they deserve some blame? I think certainly, and I think some people actually do the opposite. They almost don't give enough blame. I've seen people who are just, no, it's all the defensemen. It's got nothing to do with the goalies.
Right.
And I feel like you're not watching the same goals I'm watching because there's definitely those times. And you and I are both like the first ones to, tweet out, hey, that's not on Jones. That's a bad defensive play or that's a bad giveaway. But there's a number of Jones goals where he's got a clear view of what's going on. He should have an opportunity to make the save, and he just doesn't. Especially if you go upper corner and you go over his shoulder, chances are you're going to get a goal. And I think that's a fair criticism. Now, is it all Jones? Certainly not, right?
No.
I mean, we know Jones is a better goalie than he looks like out there right now. We've seen him for seasons. We see flashes of brilliance from him in some of these second periods where the only reason the Sharks stay in the game is because Jones plays his ass off. So I don't think you can blame him completely. I think one of the blames I have for Jones is I see a lot of games where he lets in that early first goal.
Yes.
And it's a soft goal. And then we're playing from behind from the beginning. And I think that's deflating. Like, I think it brings down the team. I think it makes it more difficult. So I do blame him for those. Now, that's not all of the goals, but that's a lot of the games where that first goal is one that shouldn't go in the first 5 minutes of the game.
Well, and that's a bigger impact with a team that's fragile right now, right? And that's struggling to score. The quicker they get behind, it just kind of snowballs. So I think the criticism is fair. Now, to be clear, anyone who thinks that the Sharks' problem is one person's fault is delusional. So that's not what I'm saying, but I do think the criticism of goaltending is completely fair. And I actually agree with what you said. A lot of people don't blame them enough. Cough Brody Brazil, who won't even include goaltending in the poll as to what the Sharks' biggest concern is. But here's my thing. I think we've gotten into this trap where the way we evaluate goaltending is to look at, okay, let's look at the 3 goals they gave up tonight. Did he have a chance on any of those goals? Okay, there's one he had a chance on, so he played well. I think that's an unfair way to look at goaltending, and I don't think you can look at it that way because every single goal typically is a good scoring chance. Every once in a while, you're going to have, a soft goal that somebody lets in, which is obviously easy to criticize. But I think that's an oversimplified view of goaltending. And we're not talking about a small sample size at this point. This problem goes back to last year.
Yeah.
If you're looking at just this year, Dell is at .878 save percentage. Jones is at .887. Anything below 90% is awful. I don't care what quality of shots you're facing. That's terrible. Especially
and you're below 90 last season when we were winning games.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Do I think you get another goalie and all of a sudden this team is, 7-1 or whatever? Like, no, I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. But I think if you try and say that goaltending has nothing to do with it, you're ignoring what some of these goals look like and just their overall save percentage. And I don't know if it's a positioning problem. I don't know if it's a confidence problem on their part. I mean, there's been a couple times when Dell comes and plays well, and so that means the next game Jones plays well, and I'd like to see that back and forth a little more. But
yeah, I mean, I agree with what DeBoer said the other night after the Vancouver game. He goes, we start every game and the first chance they score. And he's basically calling out goaltending without saying that directly. But, I mean, your job as a goalie is to stop quality chances. Sure, you're not going to stop all of them, but they're not getting as many saves as they need to. And sure, you can look at every single goal scored in the history of the NHL, and there's probably someone who missed a defensive responsibility.
Sure, there's a giveaway or There's always a giveaway or a mispass.
Well, Dylan didn't cover this guy, therefore it's not Jones's fault. Which, I mean, how many goals are there in every game that aren't scored where defensive coverage was terrible, right? I mean, it's just the nature of goaltending. And sure, blame goes around. It's not entirely on the goalie, but I think we've gotten into this oversimplified mindset of just looking at those 3 individual plays that they scored on. Oh, somebody didn't clean up in front of the net. Therefore, that's on Dylan and not on Jones. Sure, they share the responsibility, but I think the goalies have gotten a pass from some people. Other people have been more than critical. So
let's go on to the next. So we don't have defense in general in here, but I think we have the most picked on member of the defense for blame, and that's Erik Karlsson. So how much of the blame that goes towards Erik Karlsson does he deserve? And how much do you think is undeserved, and why, in your opinion, either way?
Well, the why is easy, right? It's his contract. I mean, as soon as you sign a superstar contract, you're immediately the target for criticism, whether it's warranted or not. And I think the fact that his contract pretty much led to Pavelski leaving doesn't help some people personally. I don't really care that they lost Pavelski personally, so it doesn't bother me. But
or at least they think that. We don't know that, right? Like we don't know
yeah,
that.
I mean, salary wise, yes, but they may have planned to move on regardless. So
we don't know that Doug gives him 3 years at
right
$7 million. We don't know if that's. I mean, he wouldn't give Marlowe 3 years for whatever.
People connect it regardless.
Sure.
So, I mean, I totally understand why people criticize him. Do I think he has played below what he needs to? Absolutely, but I don't think the amount of blame he's gotten is anywhere near fair, in my opinion. Especially some of the takes I've seen on social media where literally they'll, every single mistake he makes, people rant about, and they completely ignore any positive contributions that he has. That being said, he is the lowest on the total pole in terms of plus minus right now. He's a team worst, minus 13. So I do think defensively he needs to be better. He can certainly contribute more offensively. So I don't think he's where he needs to be, but I also don't think he's near the top of the list of problems for the Sharks right now.
Yeah, I'm going to keep my prediction. I think he ends up being the assist leader by the end of the season. I think he'll.
I think both of us predicted that before.
Yeah. I think he'll get there at some point. I think that we're going to talk about Schmidt coming back in a little bit, but I think with Schmidt coming back and being able to work with those defensive pairings a little more, they're going to get to a better position. But so you and I both don't like the stat that much, but the big one that everybody talked about is plus minus. He's a minus 13, but so he's a minus 13. Hurdle's a minus 12. Burns is a minus 11.
Yeah, Vlasic's up there too. He's like
Vlasic's a minus 10.
Yeah,
and he and Burns are playing the most ice time out of anybody on the Sharks.
Right.
Currently, Burns is the leader, but a few games ago it was Karlsson. It goes back and forth, right? Anytime you have the two, you're on the ice most, and your team is losing, you're going to have a higher minus. I mean, that's the way math works.
Yeah.
And if he was making $7 million, let's say he's making, that's what Vlasic's making, right?
Correct. Yep.
So let's say he's making $7 million. Is he a better defenseman than Vlasic at $7 million?
Well, yes.
By far.
Well, maybe not a better defenseman, but
I think right now,
they're about even, I would say.
I think he's a better defenseman.
Yeah.
But it's.
But you're right. It is the contract. If he was getting paid $8 million, you wouldn't hear near the amount of bitching that you do now.
I mean, how long have we watched Burns? Give up bad defensive plays and be out of position and do turnovers and starfish when he should be stopping a pass, and we just accept it because he puts a lot of pucks to the net and he gets a lot of assists.
And granted, Burns has been here for years and years. He's a fan favorite. He's got that equity built up to where he has a lot more rope with Sharks fans, at least most Sharks fans, not all. Whereas Karlsson's the new guy, and again, people are bitter as to what happened with him signing and so on and so forth. But
yeah, I think that I'm with you. I think it's a little overblown because I think it's mostly contract based. Is he playing at $13 million? But it's hard to play at $13 million worth when your entire team isn't.
Well, and I think if your issue is the contract, you should be directing your rage at Doug Wilson, not Karlsson.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask. Is to me that's more of a Doug Wilson question, right? Is Doug Wilson to blame for this?
No, we can throw that in there too. Yeah.
I mean, he's the one that made this contract deal. He's the one that let Pavs go. Right. He's the one that you should be pointing all your hatred at. Karlsson's, of course, going to take $13 million because that's what he was worth on the market. If Sharks didn't give it to him, somebody else would have. But Doug's the one that made the decision that was the right fit for the team, and ultimately he's the one that the blame should lay on if you're going to blame somebody.
Yeah, and I mean, Doug, I think we touched a little bit on the last show. I mean, I do think he deserves blame for not filling the holes that were left with Pavelski, Nyquist, Donskoy. I mean, we knew their scoring was going to go down, but to bring in absolutely nobody on the offensive side of the puck, and then in turn they bring in 40-year-old Marlowe, who I don't have an issue with bringing in, but he's not going to make a big difference. I mean, if that was your one backup plan. I don't think that was a very good backup plan, but
I mean, how good does Donskoy look right now when you look at the rotating group of guys that you're trying to find a spot for right now on the
which I mean, I don't think Donkey would be doing as good here as he is in Colorado because he wouldn't get the same opportunity, but still he's better than Radil on the second line or Goodrow and, guys like that have seen action.
Actually, I think Goody's playing pretty well.
No, he has, but I mean, he's not a top six guy, but he's been fantastic for what you would expect.
All right, so let's move on to the last one we have here, which this one should get people fired up. I think this is probably the most popular right now. Okay. I would say from my just viewing Twitter and social media.
Undoubtedly.
So, fire Pete DeBoer train is the criticism of Pete warranted? Do you think, or do you think he's being blamed for stuff that's not really in his control?
I think he's being unfairly blamed unequivocally. Not to say that coaching doesn't have an impact, but the way I look at it is whoever the players are, whether it's hockey, basketball, football, baseball, I don't care. The players on the field decide the outcome, in my opinion. Coaching can have an influence, and you have rare exceptions like Bill Belichick with the Patriots who can probably make any player successful over 20 years. Granted, Tom Brady helps, but the point is I don't think coaches have that big of an impact in both situations. Sure, there's things they can do to influence, but I think it's just a scapegoat thing. I mean, let's look through the roster. Logan Couture has 1 goal. Joe Thornton has no goals. Not that you're counting on him to score goals, but if you look at his points, he's got like 3 or 4. Timo Meier has 2 goals. We talked about Carlson struggling, Vlasic struggling, even Burns has struggled a little bit. That's where the blame needs to go, is on the star players. Those are the guys that dictate whether you win or lose, not a coach that fills out the lineup card. Now, I would certainly criticize some of the line combinations he's thrown out there, but as far as actual blame, I think he's completely just a scapegoat and unfairly.
I do think he's overly blamed. However, I'm going to blame him for certain things. Radil being in the lineup yet again, by the way. Yeah. So, let's look at this. And I know, and I don't hit the Brzezinski drum because I like him so much, but I want to compare the two, right? So, Brzezinski's played 3 games?
3 games, yeah.
And he has a point and a plus minus is 0.
Yeah, and what pisses me off about this, because I completely agree with you on this one. Okay, he plays against Winnipeg. Granted, he got injured a few times during the game, so he only played like 8 to 10 minutes. And he even got an assist on the first goal to Goodrow. And then after the game, they asked DeBoer about the fourth line performance, and he says, "Oh yeah, the fourth line was really good, especially Goodrow and Milker, I think was the other one on the line that night." And he completely leaves out Brodzinski, and he says, "Oh, Johnny, we lost him a few times throughout the game, but evidently forgot the fact that Brodzinski set up the first goal."
Yeah,
it had no fucking credit.
And even some of the watching him play, some of his plays that weren't assists were good. I mean, he had good ice presence. He could see he was making good passes. He was getting guys good opportunities. It's utterly ridiculous to me that they keep bringing Radil back into play.
I thought they had sent Brodzinski down because he was hurt, but nope. Turns out he's playing for the Barracuda tomorrow, so they sent him down even though he's healthy. So
yeah. So we got Radil, who's played 9 games, 0 contributions in 9 games, not a single point.
Yeah, which I mean, the fourth liners make much of a difference? No, but I agree with you. It's a baffling decision. It's sort of, some people say he has a similar blind spot with Tim Heed and Heed's lack of ice time, which we can go into that too. But yeah,
I mean, that's another one that. So I'll agree with that because I wouldn't say I'm a Heed fan, but I like Heed better than DeBoer clearly likes Heed. Right. He's up to 9 minutes of ice time average per game, but there were some games there that he played basically nothing after the first period, right? Yeah. And then you want to know why Carlson's got a minus 13 or Burns has a minus. I mean, why are these guys out there for 26 minutes of a game and tired and making bad decisions? Well, because you've got a defenseman who's sitting on the bench for 2 periods that you don't put him in. He's perfectly healthy.
And he did the same exact thing last year with Joakim Ryan when Ryan was playing. Same thing. And here's my biggest issue with that. I wouldn't even consider Haid a young player at this point, but if you're a guy on the team and you feel like as soon as you make one mistake, you're going on the bench, you're going to be out there afraid to make a mistake. And that's what's happening. As soon as they make one mistake, they sit the rest of the game, which that's a terrible, terrible idea to set in people's mind. And I think that just causes them to play worse because then they feel additional pressure to not fuck up.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that this is my one criticism of Pete, and it goes back a couple seasons because we've talked about this before with other players, right? Is he seems to have personal issues with some players. He seems to let that get in the way of whether or not he's going to play somebody. So he keeps playing.
Let's be clear, we don't mean personal, like, he has disagreements with the guy off ice, unless you're saying that. But
I don't know what it is. I mean, I don't know what it is. I don't know if maybe Brzezinski took out his niece for dinner or something. I don't know what it is that
like McGinn when he high sticked. I think it was DeVore, or maybe it was a different coach, but
I thought it was McClellan. But yeah, he gets traded after
traded the next night.
Yeah. No, but there seem to be players that there's just he doesn't like them. I don't know if he doesn't like their style. I don't know if he doesn't like them personally or their attitude or what. But there's players that he seems to not like, and he doesn't give an opportunity to. And he'll put other guys out there that you're like, why is this guy still out here? Why is he still taking up ice time?
Yeah.
So that's my big criticism. But overall, I think you can't blame like you said, he's not holding Logan Couture back from scoring a goal. He's not stopping, Thornton from getting assists. Like, that's not a Pete DeBoer decision.
Well, and here's some of the arguments I've heard from people who do feel like it is his fault is that, okay, change the system. Well, okay, they're using the same system that got them to the Stanley Cup in his first season and got them to the Western Conference Finals last year. I don't think the system's the issue. Sure, systems can be figured out over time. Maybe they need to make adjustments. But here's the other thing. You guys aren't at practice. You don't know what he's coaching. So you're automatically assuming that he hasn't suggested changes. Maybe the guys just aren't executing what a coach has laid out. A coach can lay out the perfect fucking game plan, but if players aren't executing it, it doesn't matter.
And nobody that is at practice have I seen talk about getting rid of Pete DeBoer as a solution to the problem, right? Like the people who do go watch practice or who are around for that. Now they don't, I don't know that any of them would ever come out and say it, but even Kurz isn't like, hey, let's fire Pete DeBoer. And he's one that wouldn't hesitate from saying that if he felt like that was what was needed.
Which that's our next question. So how much rope do you think he should get before they consider that?
I think Pete's out end of November if
this continues.
A substantial turnaround. Yeah. And one of the questions we have there is, and I've seen you talk about this, so I'll kind of turn it over to you, but is it something you do just as a shakeup thing? Let's say you don't even necessarily expect that you don't think Pete's the problem.
Right.
But is firing the coach something you do to shake up the team and try to get the players?
Well, it's one of the only options you have, and it's the easiest option, which is why you see so many coaches fired across every sport during the season, because major roster turnovers are hard to do in the middle of the season. You can make small tweaks to try to send the message, but a coaching change is the easiest way to send a wake-up call to the rest of the guys without, trading away star players in a more, drastic, dramatic overreaction type thing. So from that perspective, I would totally understand if they did it, and I wouldn't even have a problem with it. My issue has just been, if you expect that to solve all their problems, you're delusional. And even if let's say they do fire him and they turn around and rip off 5 wins in a row, I don't want to hear people say, see, all they needed to do was fire DeBoer. He's a terrible coach.
But they will.
They will. Yes, they will. I mean,
that's the thing, right? Like that's how people work. If you make a change and then everything, people were on the Marlowe train, right? That was going to turn around our season when Marlowe came back.
And I do think they would get a temporary boost, but I don't think it's going to last long term.
And then my question, which I asked you beforehand, but like we'll bring it up here, is who replaces him? Do you bring in Boogie, or do you have to go and find a coach, try to poach an assistant from another team, or pick up a coach who's not currently working and try and bring them in?
Well, it's kind of a rock and a hard place, right? Because I guess you look at it two ways. Okay, would it be better for the team to have somebody they're already familiar with and that's a similar voice, or is that a negative because you need a completely different message? And would Bugner just be viewed as DeBoer's, second in hand? Would it be basically the same? And a lot of teams have done it that way. I mean, Craig Berube, I believe, was an assistant in St. Louis when their head coach got fired. They promoted him, then they go win the Stanley Cup. So you've seen success and failure both ways, in terms of going with someone already on the coaching staff versus someone outside. So there's a lot of pros and cons to weigh. And I think as a general manager, Doug Wilson would just, need to have an idea of what he thinks the guys would respond best to. Do they respect Bugner enough, to put him in a head coaching spot, or do they need someone completely from the outside to shake things up entirely?
Yeah, I think the thing is, if you're going to say that the system is the problem, right? And really, to me, that's what you're saying with the coaching changes, that the system is the problem. I can't see Bugner doing anything different. He's part of that system. He has been for, the stint outside of it, but for the most part, he's been part of that Shark system for years. I don't think he's going to change the way they play hockey when you bring him in. And let's be honest, I don't think this team is built to play hockey a different way. They're not. They can get better at the forecheck, but they're not a dump it in and go be big bodies in the offensive zone. That's not what they play. I mean,
people's biggest complaint is that they cycle back to the point. Well, who are their two best players? Brent Burns and Erik Karlsson. So you're going to feed them the puck. So this system is almost, granted, this system was in place before they got Karlsson, but the system is really meant to help those two guys shine, and they're probably the two best offensive players they have.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Our offense feeds from the blue line, and you're not going to stop doing that because you get a new coach in. You're not going to say, okay, hey Burnsy, Karlsson, we need you guys to just focus on defense, and we're going to dump it in and have the forwards really play the puck. That's not. Which,
I mean, you can make tweaks so it's not as predictable, but I mean, just watching them play this year, I mean, there's just no chemistry. I mean, they cycle and cycle and cycle, and nothing generates. Has been the issue.
Well, people aren't there, right? When they go to that's one thing that I've noticed. There's two things. There's bad giveaways where they just seem to pass the puck directly to the other team, and I have no clue why we started doing this, including Vlasic, of all people, who I've seen multiple stupid giveaways in the defensive zone. Which, if you're going to be Vlasic, the one thing you've got to be good at is playing defense, because that's literally the reason why you're on the team.
Well, go ahead.
I say Karlsson, and maybe this is just. People aren't used to him yet. I don't know, but there's multiple times he goes to make a pass and there's just no one there. There's not someone a forward breaking away. There's not a spot that he passed it to where there should be someone and there's no one. And that's a chemistry issue. And I don't know how you fix that other than just practice and play together. But if you're changing the lines every effing night and you're bringing in half your team, I don't know how you.
I'll go back to that in a second. I want to touch on what Eric just put in the chat. That he says frustration can take over too and affect the execution. I absolutely agree with that. In fact, the biggest issue I've seen lately is Timo Meier, I think, is a perfect example. Timo is holding on to the puck way too long. He's refusing to shoot. He's waiting for that perfect scoring opportunity. And a lot of the guys, they're trying to find that A-plus perfect scoring opportunity. And then 2 or 3 passes later, it's broken up and they don't even get a shot on goal. So they need to take more shots on goal, even from not high danger areas. If you have traffic in front, create havoc, bang homes and rebounds. And I mean, look at how good they looked the Winnipeg game when they were firing everything on the net. Sure, they only scored 2 goals, but most nights, if you put that kind of effort out there, you're going to get 4 or 5 goals. So,
well, we talk about it all the time. If you've got someone in front of the net, right? Let's say they don't screen and the goal doesn't go in. You've got someone there to bang away at an assist or at a rebound. I see so many shots where there's no guy positioned in front of the net, or because I don't know why. I can't tell you why there's not someone in front of the net. I yell at the television all night long, but they are just cycling. They're skating around and
The other point you mentioned about the constant line shuffling, would be my other big critique of DeBoer, is that I understand that the team hasn't performed. You're trying to find a combination that works, but that doesn't mean you put a blindfold on and pick names out of a hat and throw them on a wall and expect it to be successful, which is how some of these lineups have looked, quite frankly. In fact, what really irritated me was, that road trip. Okay, they lost to Buffalo, I believe, in overtime, if I'm not mistaken. Buffalo was one of the top teams in the East to start the season. They go into Montreal, then win. Then they go to Toronto, lose late in the game, close game. And then what does he decide to do? In the Ottawa game, he throws out a completely random lineup against one of the worst teams in the NHL. And sure enough, they look like crap and lose. I guarantee if he had kept the same lineup, they would have won that game. But you had 4 lines out there that had no idea what the hell they were doing.
Have you seen tonight's lineup? So Kane's moved up to the first line. So you're breaking up Kane and Hurdle.
Right.
Marlowe's on the third line. I guess at least for this one, Jumbo's still playing center, so we can.
That was the part of that line. I was like, "Are you fucking serious right now? Like, come on, that's just getting real desperate."
Move Jumbo to the wing. Yeah.
I mean, he hasn't played there in 15 years.
Total winger. Yeah, you can tell by how he's played forever. So let's move on to something a little happier.
Yes, positive thoughts.
We can take
doom and gloom.
We can take some questions if people have some after that. So, reasons for hope, bright spots. Obviously, I saw a stat that we got the league's best PK, which is great. We're 12th in the power play, which is far better than we were last season. People still want to blame the power play.
I want to say at some points last year they were in the top 10, but I don't remember where they finished. But I think the stat you're referring to is that combined percentage between PK and power play, they're first in the NHL.
Yeah, that too, yeah. Well, don't we have the best PK right now, or are we second?
Yeah, number 1 in PK, but if you combine penalty kill percentage with power play conversion percentage combined, they're also number 1, or at least were as of a few games ago.
So special teams doing great.
Right. Which normally that's a critical aspect of any hockey team, but they've been so bad 5-on-5 it hasn't mattered.
That's what I'm saying. That tells you how bad
the record be if their special teams were bad. They wouldn't have a fucking win.
Tells you how bad our 5-on-5 is. Yeah. But so good news is that's going well. So barring any changes to the special teams, if we can get some chemistry 5-on-5, we're in a good position. So you and I are both excited because Shimek's back tonight. I'm really excited because I don't want to see Burns play with anybody but Shimek.
Which that's who he's paired up with tonight.
Yeah.
Anyway.
We're going EK65 and Classic, which I'm not a fan of, but I'd rather just see Dylan and Carlson. I think we'll get there. And then it'll be Vlasic and whoever. Or what are you predicting if Shimek's playing well?
I mean, I think they're going to try to stick to what they're rolling tonight. They've played Carlson and Dylan together most of the year and hasn't been good. Last year it was great. This year it hasn't been very good. So I don't mind trying Vlasic and Carlson again. If that fails, maybe you try Ferraro with Carlson and put Vlasic with Dylan at that point. I would like to pat myself on the back for saying that Ferraro was going to take somebody's job. Pete has gone to the bench. Ferraro was in the lineup, even though Shimek is back now.
And that's not surprising. I mean, he's played – while I like Heed, Ferraro's played extremely well. And so if you're not going to play Heed anyway –
Ferraro's one of those guys that's hard to take out of the lineup because he works his ass off. I mean, he gives 110% every shift. Those guys are really hard to take out of the lineup, especially for a coach like DeBoer.
He's playing like 15 and a half minutes, which is for your low defenseman, that's a lot of ice time. Dylan, honestly, to me, is still our all-around most consistent defenseman out there.
I feel like last year he was fantastic. Oh, yeah. This year I feel like he's taken a step back. But it's hard to evaluate individuals right now because the whole team has been so bad. It's like, is he just caught up in the malaise of, and Carlson has not played well, which hasn't helped him out. But
yeah, but I saw someone saying trade Dylan, and I was just like,
well,
I don't know if I trade him right now. I might hold on to him.
You and I were talking about it before the show, but I would not be surprised at all if Dylan or Vlasic get traded just because they're desperate for help up front. and that's the only place where they have some depth. Granted, that would mean he would be playing every night or Prout when he gets back. But, I mean, Vlasic's contract, first of all, if they could shed that, they would get rid of it in a heartbeat regardless of the team's current situation. And it's not to say that he's not still a good player when he's on, but he's not worth the contract. And when you have, $22 million or $20 million tied up in Carlson and Burns, can you really afford to pay Vlasic $7 million at this point?
And I'm going to call it. I don't know if I already called it. I think I may have actually last show or something, but I think Vlasic's gone before the end of the season.
If he signs off on it, right?
I think he will. So I think his problem is a mental problem, and I think that he doesn't. I don't think he's going to like being in the position he's in with Carlson and Burns on the ice. And I think that there's a good chance in my mind that Dylan ends up being Carlson's partner again at some point, which puts Vlasic on the third D pairing. And I think he'd rather go be, first or second D pair on another team like Montreal than, although he may not like the spotlight of Montreal. But
so, I mean, he grew up in that area. He grew up a Habs fan, but supposedly he said he wouldn't want to play there because of the spotlight. But who knows?
He's still got a house there.
Yeah. It's funny, though, about Vlasic. I don't remember the stat because I'm not super into the advanced metrics, and we can have a whole show about how I think that stuff is stupid. But anyway, there was some sort of advanced metric that so far in the NHL, basically Vlasic is the worst player in the NHL this year that plays more than 10 minutes as far as goals scored while he's on the ice. Like, he has the worst rate of any player in the entire NHL. I mean, that is astounding compared to what we were used to 3 years ago. Regardless of whether you buy into those stats or not, that's still astounding.
I don't know, though. It is. Honestly, Vlasic at a -10 is astounding. Like, that. I hate – we talk about plus-minus all the time, but Vlasic was a plus defenseman for most of his career. Like, most of his seasons, he was in the plus, which is pretty crazy. I mean, he was a shutdown defenseman. And now he's just you could replace him to me with almost any NHL defenseman, and I wouldn't notice the difference.
Well, and it's hard because, I mean, last playoff he did turn up his game, and I don't know if he was the old Vlasic, but he was definitely a hell of a lot better than the regular season version. So, I mean, do you just deal with his regular season problems? I mean, first of all, they may not make the playoffs this year, which we'll get to in a second, but, I mean, do you just deal with his regular season issues and assume come playoff time he'll turn it on and then he's worth it because of that? I don't think they can take that risk personally, but
yeah.
All right, getting back to the bright spots, we keep going negative, but it's hard not to right now because everything is negative.
I don't want to make that sound negative. I think the return of Šimek is positive for other reasons. One of which is if we do trade Dylan or Vlasic, we free up some money. We can go get another forward. Like, those are positive things. With the defense, with where we were on injured defensemen, there wasn't really anybody to trade, to get rid of, to try and, if you say, hey, we need to pick up somebody in the offensive zone, like,
yeah. I mean, obviously they'll wait to make sure Šimek is healthy before they even think about that, because if Šimek isn't ready, then there's no way in hell you can trade either of those guys unless you're just, convinced this season is a wash. So the other bright spot, we talked about special teams. We talked about Šimek. Evander Kane's been a bright spot, although I was just reading before the show that he is being sued by a Las Vegas casino.
Do you see how much?
For $500,000 that apparently he borrowed to gamble.
He borrowed $500,000 in markers, and apparently
it was between games 3 and 4 of the playoff series last year in Vegas. So.
Yeah.
Ugh. But putting that aside, Evander's had a good start to the season.
On the ice, though, yeah. Well, maybe we should suspend him the first couple games of every season, because he definitely came out with a chip on his shoulder, but in a way that was positive, right? Like, it wasn't, let's go out and get in a fight with somebody. It was, let's go out and score some goals. Now, most of his work's been on the power play.
Which is great, because historically he has not been good on the power play. But that has changed tenfold this year.
Because 6 of his 8 goals are on the power play, right?
And then he scored – they have 11 power play goals on the year. He scored 6 of them, so he's been their power play, a lot of it anyway.
Yeah, he's kind of that Pavelski role on the power play on the first line.
Put him, yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunate.
And he's done a good job of that.
Yeah.
So and I'm happy to see it. There was a lot of question at the end of last season. He really fell off production wise, and there was I kind of attribute it to, hey, he had a lot going on in his personal life. That's not easy stuff to bounce back from and just get your head in the game and come and play. So I was hoping to see this Evander Kane at the beginning of the season. So I'm happy.
Playoff performance is so hard to evaluate. I mean, not many guys shine in the playoffs. I mean, there's not many Logan Coutures that do better come playoff time. And certainly they need more from Kane come playoff time if they even get there this year. But it's hard to be overly critical of guys in the playoffs. It's such a small sample size and everything is so magnified. Granted, that's what you're paying people for, but I don't know. I tend to give guys a pass, especially when he's only been in the playoffs 2 years in his career. It's not like, most of these Shark guys that have been in the playoffs for 8 to 10 years and have plenty of experience.
Yeah, but it's still like it's good to have a couple shining points, right?
Yeah.
Hurdle's not playing as well as I had expected him to play, but again, on a team that's playing this well, it's hard to point at a guy and say, "How come you're not doing better?" When
and the other two individuals I think that have outperformed are Goodrow, which you mentioned earlier, and then Ferraro, who we just talked about. So those two guys have exceeded expectations.
Well, and Goody's being rewarded. I mean, he's on the second line tonight.
Yeah.
So,
he's earned it. I mean, he's a top 6 player? No, but he's playing well, so you do what you got to do.
I mean, he may be top 6 for this team right now.
Top 9 for sure. Yeah.
But it's also a chance for him to show maybe that he can be, that he thinks maybe he can step up and be a better player than we think he is.
Right.
But yeah, Goodrow, and then Gambro's actually been fairly impressive at that.
And he got hurt, unfortunately, but it sounds like he'll be back soon. He was practicing today, so he shouldn't be out too long. But yeah, we'll see. And then we'll see what Bergman brings tonight. He just got called back up. He's back in the lineup. I think in 4 games with the Barracuda, he had 3 goals and 3 assists. He had a great preseason for the Sharks, so maybe he can provide a spark. I thought he was actually pretty decent before they sent him down. He just wasn't producing, but
no, he's one of the other ones I'd like to see more from.
Yeah.
I'd like to see more from him. I'd like to see more from Brzezinski. I'd like to see those guys play a little more than they've gotten a chance to.
Well, and typically, like as an organization, every time a guy gets sent down, you want him to come back better, right? So even if he doesn't take a huge step, maybe he improves a little. Maybe he goes down again later. He comes back, and if you keep getting better each time, then eventually you'll have a useful player. So
I just can't help it. Though I don't understand Radil. Like that's the one that I cannot.
The only thing that I can think is that last year he had a 10 or 15 game stretch where he did play well. He even was on the second line with Couture and Meyer and looked good. But this year he's been horrendous since day one, even in training camp, preseason. And he's gotten more opportunities than he deserves, which, I mean, part of that is just the roster. They just don't have that many options, and evidently they don't like their other options, including Brzezinski. But he's definitely got more rope than what's warranted for sure. And even Kurz mentioned that when Brzezinski got waived, he was shocked or a little bit surprised that they didn't waive Radil instead, which fortunately Brzezinski cleared. But
yeah, and we talked about that. Maybe that's why they did it. Maybe they figured there was a better chance of clearing than Radil, because then you get to keep him really.
Which I'd prefer somebody just claim him and take him off our hands. But Radil, yeah.
I know. Okay, so looking ahead, so the last thing we have on our agenda. So do you think that Wilson makes a move? If so, like when and what?
I think he makes a goaltending switch within the next week or 2, and I think Aaron Dell gets waived or traded. I don't think anyone will trade for him, but if they can find a spot for him, then they'll trade him. But I think
do you think Dell plays another game?
I'd have to look at their schedule. If they have a back-to-back coming up, yes. Otherwise, no, I don't think he plays another game as a Shark. Okay, maybe they give him one more game in C, but I think Dell's days are numbered in Teal, and I think if they can't trade for another backup at a low cost, then they'll give Coronor a shot at the backup spot and see how he does. I mean, could he do that much worse than in 87% save percentage. I mean, come on.
They don't have a back-to-back until the 29th and 30th, so I don't think Dell plays another game.
Yeah, I mean,
and I was looking, and there's some guys who are going free agent at the end of the year, because that's a lot of times the guys you look at, right? Like that might get traded
and that aren't starting currently.
Yeah, so Ryan Miller,
which there was rumors they were going after him last year. Supposedly they were false rumors, but yeah, I would take him for sure.
He's UFA. He's a 1.1 million contract. 0.926 save. I think that would be, if you're going to go pull another goalie from another team, I think with who's available, that's really your.
I don't know if the Ducks would be willing to help us, and I don't know I think he has a no move clause because he wants to stay in Anaheim, but who knows? Maybe a opportunity would change his opinion. But so I do think they switch up the backup goalie, either Corn or somebody else, and kiss Dell goodbye. Sure, they would love to do that with Jones, but it's just not an option because of his contract. I was playing around with the buyout calculator the other day on Cap Friendly, and if they bought out Jones, they would literally be paying him for the next 10 years. They would have a $1.5 million cap hit for 10 years. In a couple of years, it would be $2 or $3 million. So it's not even realistic to buy him out at the end of the season, unless they want to eat $2 million off their cap for 8 to 10 years, which that's a big investment to just flush down the toilet.
Yeah, and his contract, nobody's taking him, so you're just.
I mean, you'd have to trade for another bad contract, right? You might be able to trade him for Jonathan Quick, ironically, who is, his former goalie mates, because Quick has not been good, and the Kings have some young goalies ready. Or St. Louis has a bad contract on their backup, Jake Allen. He's getting paid $4 or $5 million to sit on the bench. So you might be able to do something like that, but I don't see Doug making a change that significant at this point in the season, because if that doesn't work, your season's in the drain.
And then I think we both assume Dylan or Vlasic is gone as long as Shemek ends up healthy.
I'm not convinced that will happen, but I wouldn't be surprised at all.
I think a defenseman moves before the deadline.
I'll agree with that. Yeah, forward help.
Hopefully. Yeah, for forward. Well, God, I hope.
Or maybe even a backup a goalie.
Sure, but not for another defenseman.
No,
please don't trade.
I mean, they might get a 6th or 7th pairing guy back just to have depth, but that would be a secondary piece, hopefully.
And then, do you think? I'm hoping this is positive. Do you think they turn it around? Do you think they make the playoffs this year? We haven't predicted it only going in wild card or.
Yeah, we both had them. I think second in the division.
Yeah, third in the division. I think
so. Not a wild card, but man, it's really hard because you're so entrenched right now in this negative cloud, right? It's hard to take a step back and look at it objectively without saying there's no way in hell this team is turning it around. But I think back to the year they went to the Cup, they got off to a terrible start. Not quite this bad, but actually later in the season, they were near the bottom of the division. I mean, we're not talking 4 wins in 15 games, but they were near the bottom of the division. And ironically, they were in the same situation as they are this year where, some fans are like, all right, well, if we have a bad year, at least we'll get a good draft pick. Well, unfortunately, Ottawa has our first round pick this year. So kind of not an option to tank this year. And that was the same case that year as well, because they had traded their first round pick to Boston to get Martin Jones. And the first round pick this year went to Ottawa because they re-signed Carlson. So obviously they're not going to tank because their first round pick is not theirs. But do I think they make the playoffs? Oh, man, that's hard. Ask me in 2 weeks, and then I'll tell you. If I had to say right now, I'll give it a 40% chance they make the playoffs. How about that?
Yeah, so the good news is they're only 1 point behind LA, so we can still beat LA. But they're already 10 points behind a wild card spot or something like that.
They're 14 back in the division lead from Edmonton. Edmonton's at 22 points. We're at 9, so 13-point difference from top to bottom.
So it's going to be, if we're in, I think it's a wild card at this point. It's
the third spot in the division at best, but yeah, I would tend to agree.
Yeah, I mean,
But I mean, at this point, they'll take any playoff spot. They're not concerned about positioning at this stage.
Yeah, the Coyotes look good. The Ducks are decent. I don't know.
I mean, I'm sort of banking on. I don't see Edmonton lasting. That's a 1-9 team with McDavid and Draisaitl. As great as those two are, that just doesn't last.
Sure, but let's say Oilers drop off that. You've got.
I think Vancouver drops off as well.
Okay.
The only teams I see sticking are Vegas and Calgary. The other ones I think are very temperamental. Anaheim, Edmonton, Vancouver, I could all see falling off. One of them probably sticks around, but I could see the other two dropping off. And then LA's a non-factor. They're not going anywhere. Arizona's got a shot, but they're not going to run away with anything.
But I think what is interesting is, besides us and LA, this is the closest conference out of all four, points-wise.
Closest division?
Division, points-wise. Like, it's 18, 2 teams at 18, 2 at 19, 1 at 20, 1 at 22. I mean, it's a competitive division.
Which it's so early, I don't even know if it makes sense to look at the division race yet, honestly. But, I mean, that's the thing. Where they are right now, like, you don't even look at the other games. You just got to win your own fucking games. And nothing else matters at this point, because if they don't win, it's not even relevant.
Yeah. You don't even care about,
you just put your head down and you got to go win 4 out of 5, 8 out of 10 to get yourself back into it.
Yeah, and any team. You'll beat any team. You don't care if it's in Western Conference, in your division. You just want to beat anybody.
Yeah.
So, tonight's prediction. What do you got going tonight?
Do you think they make it? What's your confidence level?
I think they get a wild card.
See, if you had asked me before this homestand started, I would have said, yes, they're going to make the playoffs. They're going to come home. They're going to get it together this homestand. But then they lost the first 2 games of the homestand, which, granted, the Winnipeg game, they looked fantastic. But then the Calgary game, they shit the bed. So I think tonight, kind of segueing into that, is a huge litmus test as to whether this team has any shot. Granted, they're playing Chicago, who's not very good, so this is a team they should beat, which if they lose tonight, it's not looking good, Chad.
Chicago only has more
here if they lose another one.
They only have more points.
The tide real quick.
Chicago's only better in overtime, right? Like they're only better at getting into overtime. That's the only way they're better than us.
Yeah, I think they're like 4-6-3 or something.
Yeah, 4-6-3.
Like
so
the same amount of games they've just lost in overtime.
I'm with you. I think this game. I think it's
even if it's ugly, they just need 2 points to get some sort of confidence and momentum.
You hate to say something's a must-win 15 games into a season, but I think it's a must-win tonight. Like, this has got to be.
Yeah, they got to win tonight or next game for sure, I think.
Yeah, and who's next?
If they lose the next 2, I wouldn't be surprised if DeBoer's gone, honestly. Even if they don't fire him at that point, they may have already made the decision. They're just in the process of finding, who to replace him.
Yeah. All right, well, we tried to bring a little bit of positive into.
Well, let's do that. Do you think they will win tonight?
I'm going to give them a win.
But will they?
I'm going to give them a win tonight, and I think it's going to be just like they won on the back of Marleau coming, back. I think they're going to win on Shemet coming back, and everybody's going to be so excited, and someone's going to cover Burns' ass for once.
Yeah, I think they win tonight too. I feel like it's going to be a low-scoring, tight game. I don't see this offense breaking out. So I am going to show faith that Martin Jones has one of his best games of the year tonight. Do I think that's going to continue? God, no. But I do think he can put it together for one night here and there, but he's not consistently going to be, an all-star caliber goalie. But
seriously, over-under that Chicago scores first on a...
Oh, God. If they do score first, I think we lose, honestly. I mean, the demons are going to creep in as soon as that happens. You saw that last game with Vancouver. As soon as they scored the first 2, the team checked out mentally, especially after the third goal. They just went to sleep.
All right, there's your prediction. We're both predicting they win. But
no one is saying because
no one is saying if Chicago scores first, then we're out. We're done. You can just turn off the TV if Chicago scores first, people. Yeah. So
God, don't take it to overtime. I can't. I hate overtime. Overtime is the greatest invention in hockey if your team is not involved. But if you're involved, you want to watch 3-on-3 hockey.
I was saying that the other day as we watched Michelle and I watched hockey that wasn't Sharks hockey, and I forget just how enjoyable hockey is when you don't have your team playing. Because it's
3-on-3 is like watching a playoff game in terms of the amount of nerves involved. Because one mistake and the game's over. And we have defensemen who like to make mistakes. So.
And on those positive notes, so we're both positive note. We're both predicting a win tonight, and then we're ending the show.
I will say 3-1 Sharks. That's what I'm going with. The third goal being an empty netter.
I'm going to go 3-2 Sharks, with us biting nails in the last minute of the game as they bring 6 players to shoot at our net.
They are not going to have an easy win. You never end a losing streak with a laughing win. It's always a grinded out, oh my God, I don't know how we won that game. It always is that way with losing streaks. It's never easy. So don't expect a blowout by any means. If it is, it's not going to be a good result.
All right, so that's our show. If we don't die from stress watching this team play, we'll be back in a couple weeks or so. This has been Shark Talk 916, brought to you by Sports Talk 916. You can check us out online on Facebook, on Sports Talk 916 Network, on the web on sportstalk916.com, and Twitter at Sharks Talk 916. That's the only one where Noel and I really contribute a lot, and we tweet all the time. We should start a new game called Figure Out Which One of Us is tweeting. So go and pay attention to
figure out if you know us, but
yeah.
But give us more than 51 followers, please. We've been stuck on that number for a while.
Yeah, if you're not following us, just come follow us. We're not afraid to beg. Just follow our Twitter. And, if you've heard this show, whether you're watching it live or you're listening on a podcast, go on to your favorite podcast program and give us a rating. It can be a bad rating. It shouldn't be because we're amazing. But if, give us some number of stars and some feedback. Whatever you can do, help us help other people find us or help us decide to move on with our lives and not do the show anymore. Either way. All right, guys. Have a good night and enjoy the game.
See you.